So I'm outside Aldgate Station, about to meet Gary Hutton. But if you remember Gary Hutton from a couple of years back, he went viral on the channel with his series Prison Predator Hunter. I won't get into graphic detail, but let's just say he is a champion of children's rights. A harrowing story. Prison Predator Hunter Part 1, I recommend you watch it, there's a few parts. And he's about to give me a tour of London. So let's see where he is. Gotta find Gary now, so he's gonna pick me up in his car. Don't see him on the street yet. Might cross over the road here and check him out on my phone, see where he's at. Right, so Gary, I've just called him. He's 2 minutes away. Wants me to cross the road and go over to the Minories, which he said was to the right of Aldgate Station. Let's have a look, the Minories. Blue Boar Alley, so that's not it. Oh, they said go to the right, I've gone to the left. Alright, let's go back. I see the Minories now on that street corner over there. There's Gary waving his hand. Wants to meet me on this side of the road. Good morning, how's it going?
Yeah, very well. A bit of history about Aldgate Pump and why it's significant to the East End, because from there onwards the East End starts.
Right.
So we're going to go on a little tour. I'm going to show you about 7 or 8 places with really interesting stories of the East End.
Brilliant.
I'll tell you how the East End come about and all that. So the last time I was on your podcast it was about my life of crime. So what happened to me was, so I never had no schooling. And so school wasn't for me. It was somewhere to go and eat because they was giving away free food. But later on in life, to de-stress from the work that I was doing with the charity, working with dysfunctional kids, young people, I found history as an outlet or an inlet, and I just consumed the history of the East End. And so from then, I've been doing a lot in my spare time of the history of the East End, which I'm going to show you a bit today.
I think I'm going to learn a bit today.
I think you will. I think you will. We just have a walk up here.
Okay.
So this part of it is the city. So the city of London, the banking district, Fenchurch Street and Laden Street. All this is all new, but there's a very interesting water pump that I'm going to take you to up here. You'll see on the water pump, the water comes out of a tap that's in the shape of a wolf's head. And so that's where the last wolf was shot.
The last wolf of London?
Yeah, was shot. And so that represents it.
What year was that, do you know?
It was in the 1700s.
So London was plagued by wolves, was it, back then?
Well, apparently the last one got shot along there. So just at the back of here, if you see, it's all the city. All here is the city, all the banking district. But right in there is Mitre Square. Jack the Ripper crossed the border and killed one of his victims. But now there's not much of it left. But we'll have a look at that as well.
How's your life been since the podcast, Gary?
Been really well, been really busy. Doing a lot of stuff with a charity. I'm actually climbing Ben Nevis starting on the 28th of this month.
Brilliant.
In a few days' time.
Yeah, we did that, the Great Alma Street.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. Not.
It's scenic at the top.
Yeah, that's the only bit I'm looking forward to. So I'm going to be the first man to eat pie mash on top. So I'm sponsored by Kelly's, the pie mash shop in Bethnal Green.
Sweet.
Go to. So if we just cross over. So as you can see, the pump shawl.
Oh yeah.
So this is where you got your water from.
Wow.
Allgate pump, and as you can see, the horse's head. It doesn't work anymore, but the water comes out the wolf's mouth. But it doesn't work anymore. So this pump was where people got their water from. And so what happened was, it was being fed by rivers that run through London, and one of the rivers come through North London, and people was dying once they drank this water, and they couldn't work out why. But what was happening is the calcium in the bodies through the cemeteries that was near the river was leaking out into the river, and it was poisoning the people, and they was dying, and so they stopped producing water from the pump.
Yeah.
Because of that, because a lot of people was dying.
From the corpses?
Yeah, the calcium was running out the bodies. It was
calcium?
Yeah, in the bones of the bodies. So they had to stop, because a lot of people was dying, because this was the only place that they got water from.
Right.
So, as you can see, so here, this is where the East End starts.
Is it?
So, if you can imagine, once upon a time, and I'll give you some photos to put with this, there was gates. So Aldgate gets its name from a gate that you had to pass through to get into the city. Bishopsgate, Aldersgate, Cripplegate, Moorgate. So they was all gates that was on the edge of the city, and you had to pass it through and pay tax to come in to sell your wares. You might have been a farmer, you wanted to sell your sheep in the city or whatever, but you had to pay a tax to come through the gates. And the gates were surrounded by a wall. They was connected to a wall, the old wall of London. There's a little bit of the wall in the remnants in this office block, which I'll show you in a second. And so you had to pay to get in there to trade. So the West End was on the west end of the city gates, if you can imagine a square mile. And the East End grew up on the east end of the city gates. So the West End gets its name from being situated at the west end of the city gates, and the East End gets its name from being at the east end of the city gates, which is Aldgate.
I had no idea about any of this, Gary.
Right. And so Mile End gets its name from being the first mile ends from this spot,
Right.
which was a gate. So Mile End is a mile that way, which is the first mile when it ends there, and that's where it gets its name from. And so the East End grew up at the edge of Aldgate, because a lot of the smelly industries like the brewery, tanning, you know, leather trade, they didn't want that in the city because it was smelly. So all the industry grew up there. And so for hundreds of years, immigrants settled in the East End because it was cheap and they could get work in these industries that they didn't want in the city. So that's where the East End grew up, which we're going to go and see a lot about today. I'm going to tell you why different things are called different names and things like that. And it's going to be interesting.
I'm already learning a lot here.
So if we go over here, I'll show you the London Wall. There's a bit of it here. I don't know if you can see that, Sean.
Oh, I couldn't see it until you pointed it out. Let's see if you can see beyond our reflection. There is basically a modern wall and a window behind which is an ancient wall, which I think you can just about see through our reflection. So what is the deal with that wall? Is that the original?
Yeah, so that would be the original part of the London Wall. There's bigger parts of it near the Tower, which is in a straight line this way, near the Tower of London. So there's a bit there, there's a bit around the western side of the city that still has remnants of the London Wall. So basically it was a defence mechanism, and these gates, so it couldn't be attacked, it couldn't, you know, because the Tower of London is actually built on a hill, so it was a high point. And so Moorgate, you know, coming away from the city, Moorgate gets its name because it was moorland. So it was just moors. So yeah, it's quite interesting. But just here is Mitre Street. So Mitre Street is a very famous place in history for Jack the Ripper. He killed one of his victims here, and there's a little bit of remnants left. If I just show you, and I will show you some old pictures of what Mitre Square looked like. So what Jack the Ripper done just over there is now office blocks, and you can see they're massive. So there's a street just off of Mitre Street. I'll show you Mitre Street now. So this gets a lot of attention because of Jack the Ripper and his connection to the East End. So this was a courtyard with warehouses and things like that, but now it's just office blocks. But if you can see, James, we'll walk towards them. There you have bollards, and them bollards represent the city and the East End. So when you see the top of the bollards, that means you're going into the city of London, which is the banking district. But there's a street just there, just past Duke's Place. It's called Houndsditch. So Houndsditch, where does the word or the name Houndsditch come from? So wealthy people that was living in the city, once their dogs died, the hounds, they needed to be disposed of. So they put them in a ditch, and it's called Houndsditch, which is just there. And that's where the name Houndsditch comes from. So you know, the rich people of the city having nowhere to dispose of their dogs, there was a big ditch here, and that's where they used to just put their dogs, and that's where the name comes from, Houndsditch. And so, but it's been built up so much now. The city's, like the office blocks, is just getting bigger and bigger. So that's Houndsditch there.
It's now pure gym.
Yeah, it runs along up to Liverpool Street. It runs up to Liverpool Street, and then so just up here on the right, we're going to go and see it in a minute, is Middlesex Street. So that's where the city and the East End actually meet, on Middlesex Street, and you'll be able to see each side of the road, the bollards that I was telling you about. But Middlesex Street is more famously known as Petticoat Lane, and that's where Petticoat Lane started. And why Petticoat Lane started is because the East End was populated by Jews for many years, And
Is this like what we saw in Peaky Blinders?
yeah, so, you know, they was into all sorts, you know, different trades, but they wouldn't work on a Sabbath, which is a Saturday for the Jewish people. And so, not working on a Saturday, Sunday markets developed. And that's why we've got Sunday markets all around this country, because of Petticoat Lane.
Right.
Because of the Jewish people wouldn't work on a Saturday, which is a day of, you know, day of rest and their Sabbath, day of prayers. So yeah, and that's how Petticoat Lane developed, but we'll talk about that when we get there. But yeah, it's interesting. Sean, sorry, I'll park my car just down there. We're going to go to Whitechapel, which is just, but if we walk it, it won't take too long.
Yeah, no problem.
So we're going to jump in the car.
Okay.
And then we'll drive around to Whitechapel.
Brilliant.
And show you a place that, where and why Whitechapel gets its name from.
Yeah.
So we just crossed over. I brought my umbrella because I thought it was going to rain. So, if you can imagine, Sean White, seeing all these big office blocks going up as a kid. The first one was the NatWest Tower. And where I grew up, I used to see this being built. But I never knew anyone that actually worked there or anything like that. And didn't understand exactly what it was. You know, I grew up in a completely different place. This was full of money. And, you know, where I grew up in the East End, I used to look at these buildings and I had no connection to them whatsoever. No connection, no understanding of what was even going on there. It's amazing how much you can learn in a little 5 minutes.
And you've been going around these. I've been going around these streets for years, not knowing what any of it meant.
Yeah.
So it is fascinating to put it into place all of a sudden.
But you know, street names and things like that, they're just so interesting.
I'm surprised you could even get parking around here.
I've got found some parking just up there.
Okay.
So this is the city. So there's a congestion charge. You have to go into the city.
Yeah.
So you can find parking spaces because people feel
Keeps people out.
Yeah, they go. So do you want to go and see the remnants of that wall? It's just round here.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right, we'll go and see that because that's quite interesting to the East End.
Okay.
So the East End is basically what is called now Tower Hamlets. And so where does Tower Hamlets get its name from? So it was a little hamlet by the tower. And so, you know, when it was Middlesex. And so if you lived in the hamlet of the tower, you had to serve in Tower of London.
Right.
So that was part of the conditions that you lived there.
So what would your duties be?
Just as a basic soldier and defence.
Gotcha.
So you'll see a lot of names in the city like Portsoken. So Portsoken in the city, you know the city has its own parliament. So Portsoken is a ward. And so people in this ward, they vote people into the parliament of the city, which is in the Guildhall.
It still has its own parliament?
Yeah, it still has. So it has its own laws. And so it comes from the Civil War. There was royalists with William the Conqueror. And so he backed, or they backed, the city backed him. And so they kept their own laws and said you can have your royal family, you can do this, but this is ours. And that's what it's basically a tax haven.
Is it?
Well, it's banking.
So is that why they got London City Police separate
they've got
from?
They've got their own police force.
Yeah.
They've got their own laws. They've got their own voting system.
Is that where Westminster is?
No, this is the Guildhall.
Okay.
It's just behind the Bank of England.
Okay.
And so the Guildhall is the Parliament of the city. So they have their own MPs in these walls. And Pope Sukan Ward is one of the walls. But you can go around the city and there'll be little signs on the walls saying what ward it is.
Right.
Yeah, so this is all still the city. So you know you get these postcodes. They're like in this bit will be EC3, or you get East. Over in South London you'll have South East. Well, it's still East London. This is still East London, but this is the city part of East London, EC, and then South London basically means, and they won't like me telling you this, but basically means that you live south of East London. So there's the wall there, isn't it? In there.
Oh, what is that?
That's the London Wall. So when
That is the London Wall?
Yeah, so when they built some of the city, it goes further down. So when they build this city, they can't knock this down.
It's ancient.
Yeah. And it runs. So you imagine where we were standing before?
Yeah.
That's a straight line.
Wow.
But it runs right through any old buildings. They can't knock it down. What's
You
left?
can't knock it down with all this development going on around it.
So this wall went right to the Tower of London, and you know all the way round the city, the square mile. Yeah, so look, you've had archers through there, protecting it, as you see here, through that little hole up there.
So how old is this?
Oh, this dates back to Roman times. Yeah, the London Wall
AD
is-
200.
Yeah.
It is ancient then, isn't it?
Yeah, so this was a Roman wall. So we can actually walk through it. Here, Sean.
Yeah. 200 AD.
And you can see just over the back, that's Tower Bridge and the Tower of London where the jewels are kept. So look, if you see,
So which one is the Tower of London?
so the big one on the left is Tower Bridge, which we'll see in a second.
with the gold crown?
Yeah, and the other one is the castle, the tower. But you can see, Sean, look. See where the wall stops, and then there's a building built, and
Get
then
away from this music.
yeah, and then the wall goes again, which we're going to walk round and see.
Yeah.
But you can see it. The wall, the building's as built along the wall, and then the wall goes again. The bits that were saved.
Wow.
But you can see, look, there's, you know, this is where the archers would have stood facing outwards.
Archers!
Yeah, we'll have a walk around there. It's amazing that, you know, they do keep a little bit.
It's hidden, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. You'd have to know your way about a bit, Sean, to find some of this.
Definitely.
So the Aldgate, as a gate, as I said, that went to Colchester. It was a Roman road that went out to Colchester, east to Essex. And so all the gates, you know, they was situated so they could go out to places.
Yeah.
To different places. But we just see the back of that building, and that's where it's built in between the wall.
Yeah. Wow. They've got to build around it. So who owns the wall now?
So it'd be part of English heritage.
Like the Queen then, or the government, or the council, or...
No, it'd be English heritage, which is a separate entity.
Yeah.
We'll walk through it, Sean.
Okay. This part of English heritage.
So there's another part of the wall.
Oh yeah, look at that.
Which we see.
Wow.
Which we see from there.
What's that building behind it?
That's the Shard. So that's London's newest building.
Okay.
So this is another part of the wall.
Yeah.
And that's the Tower of London, where the crown jewels are kept.
That is the Tower of London.
That is the Tower of London.
Crown jewels.
So there's a fence there. It used to have a moat, but there's no water in it anymore.
So has anyone tried to steal the crown jewels?
No, not that I know of.
How secure is it?
I thought about it a couple of times.
They got a lot of security.
Secure. Yeah, it's very secure.
Would you get shot basically if you tried something?
Yeah, there's what they call beefeaters that guard it, and they're ex-military. And I think within 5 seconds of someone trying to do something, this whole place would close down, and you wouldn't get anywhere. But yeah, that's where they're kept. But there's also a very interesting place for me, just round here. So there's a street called Royal Mint Street. So the Royal Mint, so you know, when in the Roman times they was making their own money, every king had to have, you know, throughout the centuries. Well, the Royal Mint building is just there in the East End, where they made all the money, you know, pound coins, £20 notes, £5 notes, and of course £50 notes, which is just over here. But it's going to be a Chinese embassy soon.
Is it?
Yeah, it's been closed down for years. It moved. It's a massive, great big building just over there.
Yep.
So then the East End starts, and one of the streets right next to it is called Royal Mint Street, and that's where the Royal Mint was, just over there behind the trees. But yeah, so that's the tower, and then Tower Bridge is just round to the right. So we haven't got time today, but just behind them buildings is St Catherine's Dock. And St Catherine's Dock is a very important place for the East End. It's where the immigrants, the dock area, it's where the immigrants first come, and so naturally they look for somewhere to live, and it was in all the streets very close by around in the East End. A lot of them was merchant seamen. They come and settled here. There was Maltese, Jewish, Irish, every nationality possible. You know, in the East End, they would have their own cafes, their own spielers. There was, you know, and then crime developed as well. So, yeah, it was a place of poverty, and people trying to do good, and you know, trying to get out of poverty and working their way, do anything to get out of that situation, because it wasn't a nice place to live. But yeah, so Catherine Dock's a very important place at the East End. Now it's millionaire's paradise where they park their yachts. As you can see, Sean, I'll show you some pictures. There's a wall, a perimeter wall.
You're right to hold it. Oh, thank you.
Oh, this guy's gonna do. Yeah, you're gonna make loads of noise. Is it? So as you can see, Sean, there's lots of stuff like this in this park. So this would have been in the middle of a church. This is a tomb for someone.
This is a tomb?
Yeah, this is a tomb. So there's an outer wall, perimeter wall, that's still there. So this was a church, St Mary's, and inside St Mary's it had a little white chapel, chalk stone white chapel, and that's where the name Whitechapel gets its name from, because it was situated just outside the little white chapel. So that's where it gets its name on. So it's synonymous with Jack the Ripper and things like that. But there was so much going on here with regarding immigrants and things like that. So this is now called Apsa Alley Park. So in the 1970s, the National Front used to come to Brick Lane and protest, about their beliefs about immigration and things like that. So Apsa Alley was part of the anti-Nazi group, but unfortunately he was in a back street on his own and he was killed. So they dedicated this park to him. So what happened and how it became Bengalis. In 1978, Bangladesh got its independence from Pakistan.
Yeah.
And so they chose to have British passports, and they all come here.
Yeah.
And settled in Brick Lane because it was cheap, like many immigrants before them. Irish, Jewish, everyone. So that's why there's a big population of Bengalis here. But just along this street here, which I'm going to show you now, is the most famous hairdresser in the world.
I won't be needing that.
No, you won't be needing him. But the most famous hairdresser in the world started out.
Right.
And that's Vidal Sassoon.
No way.
Yeah, Vidal Sassoon started in Whitechapel Road as an apprentice. Because he grew up in the East End. His mum was from the East End. And she was born and bred here. And during the war, they got evacuated to Wiltshire. She evacuated their kids.
Yeah.
Vidal, he didn't know what he wanted to be, so when they come back from after the evacuation, his mum said to him, I know what you're going to be a hairdresser. And being a proper Jewish mum, she said, you're going to be a hairdresser, my boy. But he wanted to be a professional footballer.
Oh.
So his mum took him along to a hairdresser's on Whitechapel Road and said to the owner, can you teach my son hairdressing? And he went on to become the most famous hairdresser in the world.
Conquered the world?
Yeah, in the 60s, he designed the bob.
Wow.
And everyone had that. All the top models had it. And now there's Vidal Sassoon's hairdressers all around the world. Even you can have wash and go.
Is that a bob?
Similar, but it's one of them ones that goes straight around your neck.
Yeah.
The woman in what's that Tarantino film where she dances?
Uma Thurman.
Pulp Fiction.
Uma Thurman. Yeah, she has that hairstyle.
Yeah.
She has that hairstyle. Yeah. And so that become famous all around the world. But without Whitechapel, would that have happened? So we'll go and see that. But this is Whitechapel, or where the Whitechapel actually was. So Sean, I do a London giving out.
Yeah.
This is proof why it's needed if you just walk round the corner.
Yeah.
This is the East End of London. People, we just come from a city where it's molten, and it's not even like 2 minutes walk, is it? And then you have people searching through rubbish. It's crazy. I just want to show you this shop. So this building here is where Vidal Sassoon learned his trade as an apprentice as a 14-year-old. So we have a lot, there's so much to be thankful for Whitechapel. Tesco started here. So many entertainers. Billy Ocean, the singer, just grew up on the estate just a couple of streets away. There's so much we've got to be thankful for Whitechapel. You know, it's unbelievable. And this is just across the road here, James.
John.
If you just look there, is Whitechapel Bell Foundry. So Whitechapel Bell Foundry is the Bell Foundry. The American Liberty Bell was cast there, and Big Ben in the Palace of Westminster. And so that's Whitechapel Bell Foundry, but it's sadly closed down now. And so, but that's where some of the most important bells in the world have been made and cast, which is another fact. Crazy that, James, isn't it?
Sean.
Yes.
So turn it off. So we've arrived at Gary's house that he grew up in. 9 kids, 2 parents.
Yeah.
Which one was it?
This one here, number 1.
Number 1.
So this is number 1 Spelman House, and so if you look round, you can see that this place, it looks quite nice today, but you can see, so this side of the road here, that was built in the 70s, late 70s. These was, you know, factories and things like that. But yeah, so I lived here with my brothers and sisters and my mum and dad, and then we moved just around the corner, and that's when my mum sadly passed away when I was 7. But yeah, I grew up here. Yeah, and if you've read the book, there was a Jewish shop on the corner which I told you about, and he had a name that I couldn't mention or pronounce because, you know, all these Cockney people, I was used to Irish accents, and all these Cockney people would say to this shop owner, he'd walk through here of a morning and I'd be sitting out there on a step. There used to be a big step there, and his name was Gollops. That was his Jewish name, it was a Jewish name, Gollops, and he had the shop on the corner. But I'd hear all these Cockney people saying, "Morning, Mr. Gollops," and I thought they were saying bollocks. So one day I'm brave, I'm about 3 or 4 and I'm brave, and I went, "Morning, Mr. Bollocks." My mum dragged me in and wanted to know where I got the swear word from. But yeah, so this is where I grew up. There's lots of famous people. There's Chicksand House just over there. Billy Ocean, the singer. Red Light Spells Danger, Caribbean Queen. He got a Grammy for a Hollywood film, but he grew up just there. He's still touring today. He's 71, I believe, now. But he's still touring. Lots of famous people come out of the East End, or this part of the East End. Jump back in the car, Jack.
Okay. That lady looks like she wants to be interviewed.
Hi, Anna. How are you? All right? It's Gary Hutton. How are you, Anna? You all right? You still living here? Yeah. Yeah? You looking well? This is Brick Lane. See, it says there Brick Lane in the sign.
Let's let this vehicle go past.
So now we're in Brick Lane. Brick Lane is a thoroughfare road running through the East End. This had so much poverty, but this is where the rag trade was, and there's still shops today, you know, apart from the restaurants where you can buy cloth and things like that. You know, that's where Vidal Sassoon got he's before he was an apprentice hairdresser, he was working in the cloth industry, you know, cutting cloth, and that's where he got the shapes and all that from, the understanding of shapes, because he was working in the rag trade as a boy. But then he went into hairdressing, and that's where, you know, he learned about shapes and things like that, so it was useful to him. So this is called Fashion Street. And so Fashion Street is because they was making all the, you know, the clothes for the high street store, so they named one of the streets Fashion Street. And this building here was the very first indoor market in the 1700s. That building there, you can see it's very ornate, but that was the very first indoor market. You know, like we have Westfields and Lakesides and all that, but that was your very first indoor market, and that's in the East End. So that's there. And then, as you can see, the city's it's a stone's throw. It's unbelievable. But we're going to go round in a loop. But there's something very interesting along here, Sean. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the East End. So the East End is only 4 postcodes. It's not very big. It's E1, E2, E3, and the rest is East London. To explain, so this was actually Middlesex, and I can prove that to you now. If you read
Christchurch, Middlesex. Erected 1873, house and school.
So, this is part of Christchurch, which is a church just round here. It was designed by Hawksmoor. Hawksmoor was the understudy for Christopher Wren, and so they wanted to spread Christianity throughout the East End with the poor. So they put a tax on potatoes and raised enough money to build 4 churches. And this is one of the churches just around here. So now this is a very arty area,
isn't it?
Yeah, and so you can do an art tour because there's lots of people come here and do lots of art. So the hipsters that are frequenting the area now, they come and do lots of art. You can see art on posts on absolutely everything. But yeah, they come down and they do art tours. Yeah, it's on lampposts, walls, everywhere. So this building on the corner of Foundry Street and Brick Lane, it's been a lot of things. It's now a mosque. It's now a mosque. But it's been a church, a synagogue. So all the different nationalities have actually owned, or religions have actually owned this building. As people have come to the area, they want to still practice their religion. So it's been a church, a synagogue, and now it's a mosque. And so yes, it's a big cycle. So this little enclave here of a couple of streets. So it was a Huguenots Church. They was Protestants. So Huguenots, they settled in the East End after being persecuted in France for being Protestant and not Catholic. So they fled. But they had an industry and they were silk weavers. So when they come to the East End and settled, the industry come with them. And so, but they had to build houses and workshops so they could carry out their work. So if you step on this here, and then you film up on top of every building, they have like a workshop, but windows in the front, so that they could see the fine silk. So they had to get as much lighting as possible. So all their workshops was on top of the buildings instead of in the basement.
Wow.
And so they was making silk dresses for the royals at the time, but they left a big mark on this part of, this was a dairy when I was a kid, this one here. It was a dairy. But this was all derelict in the 70s. All these buildings were derelict and there was squatters. So, which one are we? Where's number 8? Number 8, right, see that padlock? That padlock has been on there since before I was born. So this used to be, so there was lots of industries, and this building here used to be Galfers, and they would be making fur coats. There was a lot of Jewish people that was in the fur trade, and this building here, they was making fur coats there, Galfers it was called, but it was sold to two artists by the name of Gilbert and George. Research them, have a look at them, they're world famous, but they've lived here since the 70s, and yeah, they've got a workshop at
So
the
they're
back.
still there now?
Yeah, they're still there now, yeah. So if you turn around, Sean,
Oh wow, look at that.
so that's why that building is the only building, it's a Royal Navy building.
Royal Navy.
So you see, this is South London over the other side.
Yeah.
And so these are old warehouses that, you know, that was ships that was coming in from all around the world to be unloaded, little different spices, fruit, everything was being delivered here.
Yeah.
But now they're all multi-million-pound flats.
Holy shit.
And the next bridge down to this one. This is the last bridge before you hit open sea.
Yeah. Wow.
And then it goes into the Westminster and up that way. So yeah, there's still more ships and everything all round here. Yeah, so this is Christchurch. This is the back of it. We're going to go and see the front. But there's something very interesting. See that up there, Sean? Do you see it hanging outside the house? So that was a tool that the silk weavers would use. So that's a Huguenot house.
Right.
And when I tell you they was derelict and squatters was living in most of these, it's unbelievable. How if we just go down here,
Wilkes.
Wilkes. So this is Wilt Street. Same again. You look at the top, you've still got the skylights and things like that. You know, this was all Huguenot silk weavers, their buildings. So this is the last building to be done up, and they're doing it now. And I can only imagine how much that goes for.
Millions.
Millions.
Americans are watching this and
Yeah.
they're like,
So this is
can't believe the prices of London houses.
Puma Court. Go along Puma Court. So they've still got the old flagstones here. And so there's a couple of little buildings here. They're called Alma Houses. So there's a few Alma buildings dotted around. So what they would be, these little ones here, they would be like you've worked in the Navy for God knows how many years, and they'll give you a little house somewhere because there's a stone up here. But there's just so my background is Irish, and this old barber shop, my nan used to own that. And
Your nan used to own
yeah,
this.
my nan used to own that. And so there's a very
It's got to be worth millions now, is it?
there's a very interesting sign on it that I want you to look. You've got to film this. So in 1832, on this spot, nothing happened.
What did happen?
No, because there's so much history. This is art.
Yeah.
That's art. Someone's put that up there as
Yeah.
art. Because there's so much happening, there's tours here all the time. Some artist finds it funny and he's done that. Yeah, look. Sure.
1860 for poor inhabitants.
Yeah. So if you fell on hard times, whatever industry you was working in, you know, they got you a house. So this here, this building in front of us, is owned by the Corporation of London. So the Corporation of London own the city, and they own a lot of land all around London and out into the suburbs. So this was Spitalfields Market, where you'd come and buy your fruit and veg on the wholesale. So all these streets would be filled with farmers with their lorries and all things like that. And so this was open in the night time. So the pubs round here had a special licence. They was called early houses. So they could be open while they work. They work from 12 o'clock at night till 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and then close. You know, everyone's come and bought their stuff. This was before supermarkets and things like that. So they, in the 1700s, they was given the license to have a market here to sell root vegetables and things like that. And then it just grew and it becomes Spitalfields Market. But now it closed down because the streets become too small for the industry, the lorries that wanted to get here to deliver stuff. So they closed it down, and now it's just a hipsters market. Gucci's got a shop in there. They closed it down not because the streets was too small, it's because it can make more money hiring shops to Gucci and things like that. But so, being Spitalfields Market and people coming in daily, lots of prostitutes come here. So just along here is the 10 Bells, the pub, where lots of prostitutes frequented, and Jack the Ripper would find a victim.
10 Bells.
So James, so Sean, why do you reckon it's called the 10 Bells? Why would it be called the 10 Bells?
I haven't a clue.
Right, I'm going to tell you. So, see this church?
Yeah.
Which is Christ Church, which I told you about, the Hawksmoor connection. This pub was called the 8 Bells. Then that church had 8 bells at the time. So that's why it was called the 8 Bells. And they changed the name to the 10 Bells because that church went and put 2 new bells in. And that's where it gets the name from. But it's famous in the Jack the Ripper world. If you can see, let's go in. And if you can see this mural on the wall, it has one of our famous artists on the right hand side. And it has the old tiles. So yeah. Oh yeah. But yeah, so this is an artwork today. And that's Gilbert and George on each corner. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of history. Yeah, so Christ Church. When I was a kid, they had a crypt downstairs, and so along here, all along this street here, what we call methos. We call them methos because they used to drink methylated spirit, and just it could get a buzz from it. So that's why you get. I mean, why is a tramp called a tramp? You've heard the expression, he's a tramp, this one's a tramp. Well, that comes from, in the old days, people would walk from village to village, but they was tramping. And so they called it tramping, and they looked terrible.
I had no idea.
Yeah, they looked dishevelled because they've been walking all the time, they ain't got nothing to eat, and they would go to village, and they would call them a tramp, and that's where we get the expression a tramp from. But, yeah, as you can see, it's all built up now. But over here, on Commercial Street, was one of the most poorest streets in the whole of the country.
Still, or back then?
No, it's got an office block over it.
Okay.
But yeah, there's everywhere I look, there's history. Where does it see this David? That used to be. They used to sell bananas. So it was the bananas. All the streets was connected to the fruit and veg market. So this was the bananas. It's still got it there. But these buildings, honestly, are worth an absolute fortune now. It's just
insane, isn't it? Can't believe how much they were.
Yeah, and so Spitalfields Market was in the East End. But as you can see, the office blocks of the city is just on the edge. We're going to go round there afterwards. There's a place called Artillery Passage, and I'm going to tell you why it's called Artillery Passage, because one of the kings used to keep his artillery there. And so there's streets like Gun Street, there's pubs called The Gun, so they're all the names. And we're going to go round it, but we're going to go back to the car.
Okay.
And then
should I turn it off?
So I'm going to show you something, right, on a picture. So I spend a lot of time doing research of places in the East End. So this little place here, which is unbelievable. So you've got, this is called Artillery Passage. And as you can see, it's a little alleyway with shops in it and things like that. Now if we take 2 steps back this way, and just, if you stand there, I'm going to show you a picture. Stand up there and I'm going to show you a picture and put it in front of the camera. That's the film The Omen, which was filmed right by this, and that's in the film The Omen.
Wow.
As you can see. So they use places like this for filming and things like that. As I said to you, this shop here is the oldest shop front in London that was purposely built to display your wares, whatever you was making. So now we take it for granted. We go along and we walk past the shop window and they've got it, but this was the first. This was the first, so they put their display on there. But that will never ever change. If you come back on it and you see how ornate it is, that van's in the way. But yeah, that's the oldest shop front.
Wow.
Yeah, so if we have a walk up here, you know, if you look, amongst all these office blocks and things like that. So Artillery Passage, it's up there, but it just says east. That's one of the old street signs. And if you look over there, it says Gun Street. So they're all got names around here to do with weapons, yeah, things like that. So artillery, this is where one of the kings had his artillery and his barracks, and so so it kept the name. I'm going to tell you about the building behind because that's really interesting. But if we walk up here, this has been in so many films, Jack the Ripper, because of the night time. You can see it hasn't changed much over the years. But now it's like restaurants and things like that. Growing up as a kid, this was just, abandoned, and no one really come here. Yeah, no one really come here, but it's in so many films and things like that. So this, if you look down there, this alleyway, you've seen it on television programs, everything. So, just along here, there's a synagogue. So as I told you, in the East End, and the East End being a really small place, there was 400 synagogues in such a small area, and this is probably one of the last working synagogues. So to keep a synagogue going, you have to have 10 members. So the Jewish population moved out. So now they only hold services for city people that are Jewish and a couple of local people. But yeah, this is called Sandy Road. It's one of the very last synagogues that still practice and have services. Beautiful inside. But yeah, this is in the middle of a metropolis of the city buildings. And so you wouldn't even know this was here. But we'll have a little walk along and I'll show you.
There's so much hidden, isn't there, in
Yeah,
London?
no, it's unreal. Like people, if you went on you would never see none of this, because I guarantee you the people that are walking around, if they don't work here, they're lost. So, there's names of streets, it's unbelievable. There's a street just here on the left hand side, it's called Frying Pan Alley. Now why would it be called Frying Pan Alley? So, back in the day, outside all the shops, it's not there, there's nothing there that resembles it now, but this was an alleyway, and it was an alleyway that went through it. You can see there, look, Frying Pan Alley. Why it was called Frying Pan Alley is because this is where ironmongers worked and made frying pans, and they would hang them up outside the shops. And so it was known as Frying Pan Alley, so they give it the name Frying Pan Alley, because it's where they used to make frying pans and anything metal. So So this road here is Middlesex Street, and this is where Petticoat Lane grew up and started. It's still a market on a Sunday. As you can see on the floor, they're marked out for stalls. But this side is the city, and that side is the East End. So there's a different police force over there and a different police force here. Just over on the right, which we're going to go down to, so you can imagine these are all flats now. These are all flats and things like that. But they was just, warehouses and, just all things like that, making all the clothes for the high street stores. But Petticoat Lane, you know, has its tradition as a market, but it's not much of a market anymore. It used to go through every street, but there's just nothing left of it now. If you come here on a Sunday, you know, and there's not that many people here, but there used to be hundreds of thousands of people that would turn up here on a Sunday, and you would, honestly, every street was packed like you was sardines.
Wow.
But you had some of the best salesmen you'd ever come across. You know, they could sell absolutely anything. They would sell anything. And they had, you know, crowds of people random. And it was like theatre. It was like street theatre. Yeah, it was like street theatre. So as you see, Middlesex Street. So Middlesex Street gets its name because this was Middlesex. Outside the city was Middlesex. So the East End grew up out of Middlesex. And you see the posts just there. Post here shop. So here, I'm in the East End. If I go past this post, now I'm in the city. So this is the boundary. Instead of gates and things like that anymore, they just have these posts. But yeah, that's a post representing the city. See if you see here, look. That's the coat of arms for the city. Sunday it was called Petticoat Lane because it involved lots of different streets, but on a weekday it would open up on a Thursday and a couple of days during the week, and it was called Wentworth Street. And this is Wentworth Street here. Some of the best salesmen that ever worked the street market come out of here and Petticoat Lane. There's still some bits going on now, but it's not. This would have been packed, you know. And this is a market day. It's died. It's died now. But this was just—it was unbelievable. You know, if you got an £100 note here, fly pitchers. You know what fly pitching is? You just go get something hooky, set up stall, and just sell it to the public. Or you'd go to an wholesaler's and buy it cheap, and then come here and sell it. You could sell absolutely anything. This here when I was a kid, so this is Laden Street. There used to be a poultry factory, chickens, where you could come and buy them live, take them home, cut them up and eat them. So many people used to come with that. There was loads of places like that in the East End. But yeah, so this was a street market that went along here, Petticoat, like Wentworth Street on a Sunday, and then on a Sunday, all these streets would have, you know, different markets in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, see that sign, Petticoat Lane, established in 1650. Fashion, fabric, shoes, restaurants and street food. And as you can see, it's just street food today. There's not much being sold here. But this was a thriving, buzzing area. But now it's all being taken over and built up. Yeah, so as the population's changed, the market's changed, and so street food is more popular. You know, because you got to remember, when it was Jewish people, Irish people, they'd be coming out buying fruit and veg, you know, buying bits of clothing they need. But it's a completely different population of people now. Yeah, it's changed so much, it's unbelievable. That old building down there has got a lot of history. So it's called Providence Road, and it was it was a convent, and so the nuns used to feed the poor. And so you'd knock on the door, you could get a bed there for the night for a penny. So a lot of the prostitutes in Jack the Ripper time, they used to, you know, queue up there at night to get a bed. If they couldn't get a bed from there, then basically they was living on the street. But he's a very interesting character. He sells hats. This man here. See him?
Oh yeah?
You want to speak to him?
Yeah,
No.
definitely.
Excuse me? Excuse me? Could we just have a chat? Because you look so interesting. So I know you sell hats in the market, don't you?
Yeah.
You sell hats in the market. How long have you been selling hats in Spitalfields?
We've had the business for almost 10 years.
For 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's still going well selling hats.
We sell 20,000 hats a year.
20,000 hats a year. Wow, brilliant. And what is your fascination with hats?
No, it's business.
It's a business, so but you like to wear.
No, I've always worn a top hat over
Have you?
40 years. So.
Really? I've always seen you in it, but I didn't know you'd done it well for that long.
No, I didn't. I've always worn a top hat.
Wow,
So it's
brilliant.
part of the business.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so that building there. So it'd be like for any poor. But there's something along here I'm going to show you, and you'll read what's on top of it. It was for a certain minority. And then I'm going to tell you why this street is called Tender.
So have you seen the Mad Hatter out before?
Yeah, he's got a stall in the market,
Yeah.
and he's been selling hats. But he's a wholesaler on Commercial Street,
Ah.
so he goes and buys it there wholesale,
Yeah.
and then sells it in Spitalfields Market. So you know, yeah, look, soup kitchen.
For the Jewish poor.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they would go in there. You'd get food, clothing. As you see, it says the way in. You get food, clothing. You'll queue up, and then you'd go out, and you'd come out there the way out. So by the time you got out on the out, you had what you needed: food for the day, clothing for the day. But it was just particularly for the Jewish people of the community. And so that's Jewish states, because they don't believe in Christ, so they don't start at the year dot to the millennium. We're 2,000 years in, but they don't. Their date, it doesn't start at the same time as the Christian one.
5662.
Yeah, it's a 1902. So yeah, so a lot of people in the Jewish area, the poor people of the Jewish community, will come here, and they would get food, clothing, you know, and a little bit of help or whatever they needed. But that building's still there.
So we're near Camden.
No.
Camden Town Brewery. Why does it say that there?
So they probably sell. This is still Petticoat Lane.
I thought we were miles away from Camden, aren't
So
we?
they probably sell Camden Town beer. It's just a sign.
Just a sign.
Which I'm going to show you in a minute. Why is there a pub on every street corner?
Yeah.
Even in Liverpool. Why?
Why?
Truman's. So Truman's Brewery started in Brick Lane, which I'm going to show you in a minute. So it was Truman, Hanbury and Buxton. There's 3 streets that run each side of it. Hanbury Street, Buxton Street, and Truman's in the middle, the brewery. So they was the 3 people that set it up. And when they brought Thomas Buxton into the company, he had an idea: let's put a pub on every street corner and sell our beer. And they did. And if you go anywhere around the country, you'll see a sign on top of it: Truman, Hanbury and Buxton. It was his idea. But I met a year ago, I met a descendant of the Buxton family, and he said to me, it's been a curse on our family ever since. I said, why? He said, because look at that: alcoholism, family breakups, people being, you know, being abused at home. It's because we put a pub on every street corner, and he said it's a curse on our family. And I thought, curse on your family? Do you realise how much money you got from that? But yeah, each to their own. So there's a lot of street names that get their name from different parts of history that grew up in the East End. So Spitalfields, you got to look at the spelling. Spitalfields gets its name from a hospital that was in a field just on the plot where Spitalfields Market is. And so if you look at the word hospital, Spittle, and it's hospital, so that's where the word hospital comes from.
Wow.
Yeah, Spitalfields,
No idea.
it comes from there. So this here, 10 grand. So you've heard, you know, for years people always, you hear people saying I'm on tender hooks. You know, it means like you're stressed, you stretch, you know, you're on tender hooks. So a tender is a square block and it had 4 hooks, one on each corner. And the Huguenot silk weavers used to use it to dry their silk, but they would stretch it out. They put it on one hook, that hook, that hook, that hook, and stretch it out. And then you become on tender hooks, you're all stressed out.
All these words I've used and I've never ever known
But that's where it comes from.
the history of them.
It's the Huguenot silk weavers. So this building here, this has been knocked down. This is new. They had to keep a little bit, but it was the wool exchange, and so that's where the price of wool was set every morning at fruit and veg.
Huh.
But they had to keep it. So as you can see, it says this is Crispin Street. This road here is called Crispin Street, and it says women on top of there, and it says men on top of that one. This was the hostel that I was telling you about in Jack the Ripper times. You could come here and you could get a bed. Women would go in that way. There'd be food and clothing and beds. You'd get it for a penny, and then the men would go in that way. If you didn't get a bed in there, you slept on the street, and you would, you know, sell your body to go somewhere warm because the punter's going to pay. He might have a room or somewhere. You can get a room somewhere to do your business. But yeah, so they're all fascinating little streets. So yeah, so the price of wool and fruit and veg was settled here every day. But this was Davao Street here, and as I told you before, Davao Street was the poorest. There was more bed sits, you know, being like you'd get a room here for like peanuts. Do you know what I mean? A lot of prostitutes used them because, you know, it was so cheap, and it was the most deprived street in the UK.
Wow.
And that's in Victorian times, and you can imagine how bad it was. But there was, you know, there was rest houses and all sorts of things where you could go and sleep for the night.
Yeah.
Just find a bed. But mainly it was prostitutes' quarters. So Donovan's, they still exist. They sell papers. But see, it says up there, Percy Dalton.
Yeah?
Percy Dalton was the peanut man. So it's famous all over the country. Percy Dalton at football matches would go around shouting, peanuts, peanuts, and you buy a little bag of peanuts. But this is where they started. They started here. So there was an old pub here, and when they changed it, they had to keep the front of the building, and then keep the pub. So they had to replace it with a pub. But this was the old fruit extract. That's one of the Hawksmoor churches, Christchurch, that I told you about. Yeah, do you want to go into, we're going to People's Market. So this was where you come and bought your stuff wholesale. If you had a fruit stall, fruit and veg stall, or you had a shop selling fruit and veg. But now it's a hipsters market, and it's got, look, Peloton's got a shop in here. But, so when I first left school, I worked here. And it was you start at like 12 o'clock at night and finish at 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, no, I know a better way to earn a pound note than that. But now it's a trendy hipster place. Yeah. But it's got a lot of history, this. So this would have been fruit wholesalers. They would have specialised all different specialities, one in bananas, in apples, to buy the best apples, oranges, you know, and then a lot of them would do a mixture of stuff. Whatever they bought cheap, you know, they'd move it on. But now it's a completely different, vibrant place. So this was full of old Cockney porters, do you know what I mean, running about with barrows and all that. It was crazy. Yeah, so you can buy food here. It's very trendy. There's bars in here.
It's atmospheric, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So this is open most days. So instead of people going to Petticoat Lane now or Wentworth Street, they come here because that's what it used to be. Petticoat Lane.
So many choices.
Yeah, they come here because the city's right close to it.
Yeah,
Same as what Petticoat Lane was, Wentworth Street. But they'd rather come here. This is more trendier than a street.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can buy anything arty. So all the arty people that come here,
Yeah.
you know, that have moved here, they sell their wares here. Yeah, so as I told you, this is owned by the Corporation of London, and so some upstart selling fruit and veg, not getting much money out of him. If we turn it into this, we can earn a fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it ups the rents.
More spending.
Chanel. So for me, this is madness that Chanel could be selling here, or any big name. I just find it, you know, it's just crazy.
Just shows that anywhere could be redeveloped.
Yeah, yeah. So what they do is they gentrify an area, especially, you know, what I perceive to be a ghetto. They gentrify it, and then it just becomes somewhere everyone wants to live. So it's right opposite the 10 Bells.
Oh yeah.
And
Back at the 10 Bells.
Christchurch. Yeah, as you can see, it says up there, look, Fruit and Veg and Wool Exchange,
Yep.
Corporation of London. So when this was a fruit and veg market, that's where they would determine the price of the fruit and veg for that day. So they was always in control. So every market had to be 6 miles, it's law, has to be within 6 miles of Buckingham Palace. So the markets, flower markets, fruit and veg markets, fish markets, so Billingsgate, Covent Garden, Spitalfields, they all had to be within 6 miles of the royal warren, so that the royal family can get fresh food, can get fresh fruit, veg, flowers. It's only within 6 miles.
Wow.
And that's why you had them all. That's why you had them all close to central London,
Yeah.
within 6 miles. And even though, like, Covent Garden now is basically like this. It's a trendy place. Covent Garden moved within 6 miles. It still exists as a flower market, but it's just on the other side of the Thames. But it has to be 6 miles within Buckingham Palace. And this market, New Spitalfields Market, now is in Leighton, which is still in that 6 mile radius. So you'll see, just up on top of this building, there's a boundary stone. So everywhere they would have boundary stones, and they would do something once a month, once a year. They would call what's called beating the boundary. So people from the local area will go out and they would see that stone up there? So Christchurch, Middlesex boundary. So this was one of the boundaries of Christchurch Spitalfields. And so they would go to the four corners of Spitalfields and beat the boundary. And so that was one of the boundary stones that they would beat. And so it was just a tradition to, you know, let people know the boundaries of where they lived.
Wow.
How I know some of this stuff is beyond me.
Gary, you are an encyclopedia of East End knowledge.
So we've basically we've done a bit. We've touched on the East End, but we've done mainly Whitechapel and Spitalfields.
Okay.
So there's still more of the East End, the dock area, and you know, things like that. Bethnal Green, Bow. There's still. So the East End is basically 4 postcodes: E1, E2, E3 and E14. The rest of it's all East London. So the way I can explain it, Sean, right? So you know the West End? The West End to everybody is the party venue, theatre and everything like that. So that's the West End, and it's only a small place, isn't it? So different parts of West London, you don't call it the West End. So the same for the East End. You don't call the whole of the East London, because East London's a big place. You don't call the whole of East London the East End. So I'm an East Ender. I was born in the East End. And so someone that's born, you know, out in East London, they're not even a Cockney. Because you had to be born under the sound of Bow Bells. Bow Bells, the church, is in Cheapside, which is in the middle of the city next to St Paul's. So how did I hear it out in Leytonstone when I could just about hear it in Stepney? Do you know what I mean? So they're not even Cockneys. So if you have the rule is that you have to be born under the sound of Bow Bells. So, you know, out in Leyton and as far as Canning Town, you know, these places, Plaistow, they're East London. They're not the East End. It's 2 completely different places. Okay. Enjoy that?
Yeah, do you want to say something in conclusion?
Yeah. So that's my passion. So my passion is the history of the East End, and in it being so, I have to absorb as much as possible. You know, some people just walk down the streets, but for me it's different. I'm constantly looking for stuff that people wouldn't see. I mean, next time if Sean wants to do it, there's so much more to see. But today we've just done a walk of the East End, basically Whitechapel and Spitalfields, which is the very start of the East End of London. And so I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it's inspired you to go and find out a little bit of history about yourself, and maybe there'll be a part 2. And thanks to Sean.
Huge thank you to Gary. We've got a East End Insiders look at some of the East End today. I definitely want to come back at night time when it's just going mental on Brick Lane and the surrounding areas to see what the vibe is like and talk to some local people. And please support Gary as well. Huge thank you to Gary. Where can people find you, Gary? Get your book, follow you on socials.
Yeah, so the book, so I wrote a book about my life being brought up in the East End. You've seen me do Sean's podcast too. It can be bought on Amazon. It's a donation to the charity. Sean will have all the links on this post, I'm sure. But yeah, we're all a product of a postcode. Our mentors and our role models make us what we become. And the younger you find a passion, the better you are. I found my passion a bit late in life, and that's local history. And I absolutely love it, and I hope you've enjoyed it. And look out for part 2.
And I thought I was going to learn a thing or two. I didn't know any of this stuff. So, thanks, Gary.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Cheers. Brilliant. Brilliant.